Steve, you going to fill in? Everybody, if you will, raise your hand if you're a daily Bible reader. Mike, he's in no shape to count daily Bible readers today. He's counting the money that's gone. We got any extra quarterlies? This microphone and I are not getting along. All right, while they're looking for extra books, this morning, of course, we're still studying in the book of Judges, and the Israelites, who obviously were God's chosen people, had grown accustomed. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, but and we've talked about it every time. They had grown accustomed to a strong leader. You know, they had Moses and they had Joshua. And while they weren't faithful when those men were there, if they really got in trouble, if you will, raise your hand if you need a book, and Barry's got some extra there. If they really got in trouble, they at least had someone they could go to, that they could reach out and physically touch and beg for help, beg for someone to plead for them as much as anything. But Moses and Joshua are gone. So God was raising up various judges who would do just that. They would judge these people at a time when they really had no leader. People were doing their own thing, they used to say back in the 60s. Let's turn to Judges 2. I want to read verses 8 through 16 really quickly, just to kind of show you where they are and what it is we're looking at. Maybe help set the stage for what we're going to see later. Judges chapter 2, verses 8 through 16. Then Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. And they buried him in the territory of his inheritance, and in Timnath-Heres or something like that, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. All that generation were also gathered to their fathers. And there arose another generation after them, who did not know the Lord, nor yet the work which he had done for Israel. And I want to stop right here. And I want to point out, because I'm going to say this 2 or 3 times during this lesson, if everything goes the way I mean for it to. We can lose this congregation in one generation. We've lost a bunch of people here. Neither of my children are here today. And I'm burnt about it. But it's that quick. We can lose this congregation. If we don't get in there and work and we do everything we can do to get other people to come, to encourage them when they're here, to encourage them to come, it can happen just that quick. We see it over and over with the Israelites. Then the sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. And they forsook the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods. They let other things come before them. I thought Edward's lesson this morning, and I went back and told him, it's one of the best lessons he's had here in a long, long time. They let other things come between them and God. We can do the same thing today. Maybe it's not an idol, but maybe it's something that we prioritize over being at church, over following God, over serving the way we need to. Among the gods of the peoples who were around them, there's the other thing that you see that brought them down. They were told when they went into the promised land, kill everybody there, man, woman, child, dog, cat, everything. And they didn't. And they let these other people influence them. We all suffer, is that the right word? We all experience peer pressure. And like it or not, we all give in to peer pressure. And that's what they were doing. They let these other people influence them. and they bowed themselves down to them. They provoked the Lord to anger. So they forsook the Lord and served Baal and the Ashtaroth. The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he gave them into the hands of plunderers who plundered them. And he sold them into the hands of their enemies around them, so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. Wherever they went, the hand of the Lord was against them for evil, as the Lord had spoken and as the Lord had sworn to them, so that they were severely distressed. And here's what I'm trying to get to. Then the Lord raised up judges who delivered them from the hands of those who plundered them. The purpose of the judges was to judge, but they were also leaders. God helped them lead them out of trouble. We're going to study, as we study in Judges, if you take Gideon, who we're studying this morning, and then later we're going to study Samson, those two are the biggest time consumers. They're the ones judges are spent on more than the others. But we've already studied some judges, and we're going to study one or two in between. So there were different judges for a shorter time. Anyway, this is where we find the Israelites this morning. The Midianites and the Amalekites and other people from the east are making their lives miserable. They've come up and attacked them. They're wiping out their food supply. They're killing their economy, not to mention their spirits. The lesson we need to learn from the fact that God chose these different men and women, these different people to be judges, is God picked them where they were. They were, as we study Gideon this morning and again next week, we're going to see that they are about as far from perfect people as there could be. When we get into studying Samson, Samson was a womanizer. He was a vicious man. They weren't who we would describe as good people. But God saw something in them, and he made the most of their talents that they had. And he used their potential. You know, if you wait around to serve God until you're perfect, you're never going to serve God, are you? The talents and the potential that you have are going to be wasted because we're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect. All we can hope to do is to do better tomorrow, to be better, be the kind of people we need to be. And that's what we've got to work on. This morning we're going to meet a man named Gideon. Gideon was a man of excuses. When we read through the text in just a second, I want you to notice how much he sounded like Moses when Moses was trying to tell God why he couldn't be the leader of God's people. Gideon was a brave man, although he was hiding in a wine press when we meet him this morning. And he sure didn't think he was a brave man. Gideon was a man of faith, although he tested God. If we've got time, we're going to read 3 different times that he tested God before he would actually take the reins and go do what God told him to do. Now, let's read our text this morning. It's from Judges 6, 1 through 6, and then verses 11 through 21. If you're reading it out of the book, it's on page 61. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel. Because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made for themselves the dens, the caves, and the strongholds which are in the mountains. So it was, whenever Israel had sown, Midianites would come up. Also Amalekites and the people of the east would come up against them. Then they would encamp against them and destroy the produce of the earth as far as Gaza, and leave no sustenance for Israel, neither sheep, nor ox, nor donkey. For they would come up with their livestock and their tents, coming in as numerous as locusts. Both they and their camels were without number. And they would enter the land to destroy it. So Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Verse 11. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth tree, which was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, I guess, while his son Gideon threshed wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." And Gideon said to him, "O my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has this all happened to us? And where are all his miracles which our fathers told us about, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord had forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites." Then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?" So he said to him, "O my Lord, how can I save Israel? Indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." And the Lord said to him, "Surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat the Midianites as one man." Then he said to him, "If I have found favor in your sight, then show me a sign that it is you who talk with me. Do not depart from me here, I pray, until I come to you and bring out my offering and set it before you." And he said, "I will wait until you come back." So Gideon went in and prepared a young goat and unleavened bread from an ephah of flour. The meat he put in a basket, and he put the broth in a pot, and he brought them out to him under the terebinth tree and presented them. The angel of God said to him, "Take the meat and the unleavened bread and lay them on this rock and pour out the broth." And he did so. Then the angel of the Lord put out the end of the staff that was in his hand, and he touched the meat and the unleavened bread, and fire rose out of the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread. And the angel of the Lord departed out of his sight. Last week we studied about Israel's battle with Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, and we saw that Sisera was killed by Jael. So a woman killed him instead of the leader of the Israelite army. After that, Judges 5:31 tells us that Israel had rest for 40 years. And here I go again, pointing out, one generation is all it took. For 40 years they had rest. Things went well for them. They lived comfortably. Does it sound like us today? We've got a comfortable life. We don't have anybody coming in here and saying, "Hey, you can't worship God on Sunday morning." We can come do anything we want to do. And we take that for granted. And that's what they did. In that 40 years, they drifted away. They let these other idols come in. The people of the lands influenced them. And they were trying to serve God with the big G and the gods of the people in that country. They would worship God, at least in name. But then when they were worried about, am I getting enough rain, or do I need my crops to grow, they would go to these nature gods. They would worship trees or rocks or cattle or whatever, and try to merge together these things. They were trying to improve, I guess, on God's way of worshiping and of studying. So, because of this, they were delivered into the hands of the Midianites. Now, Midian was another son of Abraham by his wife Keturah. We read back in Genesis 25, verses 1 through 2. So they were really blood relatives. These were their cousins that had come in and taken them over. Midianite traders were the ones who sold Joseph into slavery. Genesis 37, verses 28 and verse 36. Eventually, Moses led the Israelites into battle against the Midianites to take vengeance for the Lord on Midian. Numbers 31, verse 3. We also know the Amalekites. We've heard of them over and over. Moses was told, you go in and you wipe the Amalekites out completely. But they didn't do it. And because of that, here they are later, a generation or two later, the Amalekites are coming back to bother them again, to take them over. In Exodus 17:11, remember the story about Moses having the battle, and he kept holding his hands out and he'd get tired and they'd start losing? and somebody finally had to hold his hands up, that was against the Amalekites. And here they are again. If they had just gone on and done what God said. The Midian and the Amalekites were cutting down Israel's food supply before they could harvest it. Hence the reason Israel was hiding in the hills. They were afraid. They had lost their swagger, we would say today. And they were hiding in the rocks and caves. Finally, the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, which is a familiar pattern we see. It seems like every time we read this, they're getting further and further away from the Lord. They hit rock bottom. They beg for forgiveness. They promise we'll never do this again. God sends in this case, a judge, and other times a ruler. He throws off the shackles of whatever people he being God, sent in to control them, and they get a second chance. You know, when somebody close to me is sick, or when they're in a problem where they seem they can't handle it, I'm really good at praying. I can pray hard and I can pray fervently. Can you do that? Do you do that? But on the other hand, when things are going well, I don't pray as hard and I don't pray as often. And I sure don't thank God enough that things are going well. Do you do that too? We all have to be careful there. That's what happens. We get comfortable and we lose our focus. We forget why things are going well and where these good things come from. We just enjoy that things are going well. We have to really work on that and make ourselves concentrate and focus on why things are what they are. We don't see it in our text, but down in verse 8, we're told after they start looking to God for help, that God sends a prophet to tell them what happened. You know, when you punish Caroline, you have to tell her why, because, I don't know why, because she's not listening when you tell her, but still, you're supposed to. So that's what he did. God sent this prophet to tell Israel, here's why you're in the shape you're in. And in verse 10 it says, but you have not obeyed me. It was simple as that. They knew what to do. They'd been told over and over, but they wouldn't do it. Now to the second part of our text and where the judge comes in. God sends an angel to Gideon as he's hiding in the winepress. And remember, the reason he's in this winepress is to keep the Midianites from seeing that somehow he snuck out some wheat. So he's got to process the wheat so they can make it into bread and have a meal. So the angel shows up and he calls him a mighty man of valor. You can almost hear Gideon laughing because he knows he's hiding in the winepress. And he says that he's the youngest of the weakest clan in Manasseh. Again, the lesson here is God can use us wherever we are and whatever opportunity shows up for us. But the Lord tells Gideon that he'll be with him. Then he does something that I'm afraid we do. Look in verse 13. He tried to blame God when he said, the Lord has forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianite. Did you notice in the last week or two Elaine's sign out front when it talked about if you and God are not as close as you used to be, who moved? There's a whole lot of truth to that lesson. God doesn't move. So if we're not as close to Him as we used to be, we're the ones that have changed. We're the ones that aren't where we were before. Next, Gideon asks for a sign. And he goes to prepare some of this scarce food that he has for the angel. The angel causes a fire that consumes the food, and Gideon takes that as a sign that he really is hearing directly from God. Now, we don't have time to read it this morning, but if you get a chance this afternoon, read the next few verses after this. Gideon goes and gets, I think it's 10 of his friends, 10 of his relatives, and they sneak in the middle of the night and tear down the idols that Gideon's father, Joash, and the other leaders of the city, leaders of the area, I guess city's not the right word since they're hiding in caves, but still, the leaders, Gideon tears down these idols, hacks them up. Gideon is another word for hacker, by the way, and that's where this comes from, according to the teacher's manual. But he tears these down, and then the leaders of the area come to Joash, Gideon's father, and say, we know Gideon did this because some of the guys told on him. We know Gideon did this. We've come to kill him. And Joash says, why do you need to kill him? If Baal really is a god, he'll punish Gideon. You don't have to handle that for him. So it almost appears as if the bravery of Gideon helps turn his father around, maybe brings him back where he needs to be. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but that's the way it looks. My point is, we never know who we might influence. We never know who might be watching. And I want to challenge you this week from this. Ask somebody to come to church. When you run into some of these people who aren't here anymore, talk to them. Tell them we miss them. Tell them it would mean a lot to us for them to be here, and it would mean a lot to them to be here. We have so many that used to come and just have drifted away. And we need to do what we can to get them back for their sake and for ours. Make the opportunity. If you see them in the grocery store, don't duck down the other aisle. Work up the courage. Have the bravery to go talk to them. And if that doesn't work, make a special effort to go see them. Now, this always scares Dusty because I'm going to talk a little bit about Dusty's lesson next week. Let's go on down. I want to read Judges 6, verses 36 through 40. You know, I say this over and over again, but we see the people in the Bible as comic book characters, not as real people. What we have to do when we're reading the Bible is tell ourselves these are real people just like us. They have fears, they have doubts. Gideon has just had an angel come to him and talk to him. He puts out this special test for the angel to do, and the angel does it. He does a magic trick. That's the way we would look at it. So Gideon believes that God is talking to him directly. Everything's going well. Gideon works up the strength to go tear down his father's idols, to risk his life. He knows the leaders of that area are going to try to kill him when they find out it was him. He goes and does that. You would think, man, this Gideon, he's got it all. He's brave. He's wise. Look at Judges 6, verse 36. Gideon has just done all this. Keep in mind. Now God tells Gideon, hey, go get your cousins, go get all your family. We're going to go get these Midianites. Gideon has just seen the trick with the angel. He's just seen himself escape from the leaders of his own area because his father argued for him. You'd think he'd be on a high, buddy. He could climb a wall right now. But he still doesn't trust God. Judges 6, verse 36, Then Gideon said to God, If you will deliver Israel through me as you have spoken, behold, I will put a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece only, and it is dry on all the ground, then I will know that you will deliver Israel through me as you have spoken. So you understand the test? Dew's going to fall at night. I'm going to lay this fleece out. If it's wet, the ground's dry, we're good. Verse 38, And it was so, when he arose the next morning and squeezed the fleece, he drained the dew from the fleece, a bowl full of water. God jumped through the hoop. That wasn't enough. Then Gideon said to God, "Do not let your anger burn against me that I may speak once more. Please let me make a test once more with the fleece. Let it be dry only on the fleece, and let there be dew on the ground." So you understand now, God, do it the opposite way. Maybe the other side was some kind of trick. But now you make the fleece dry, the ground wet. And of course, God did so on that night, for it was dry only on the fleece, and dew was on the ground. I'm not sure why God did this for Gideon. I would have grabbed a lightning bolt and I would have zapped old Gideon right where he stood. "I've already built you up, Gideon. What are you waiting on?" Well, he told him what he's waiting on. "I know you built me up, God, but I just not quite there. I just don't quite trust you." But God did. And Dusty will show us next week whether Gideon did. And more importantly, how Gideon did. Gideon was a man of excuses. Are we? I hope you'll forgive the personal reference, but Alan White last week. We know Alan. Alan was scared absolutely to death to get up and speak like that. But he did a great job. And I told Chris after the service Sunday, we went over to the assisted living, and Alan was there, and he was absolutely as high as a kite. He felt great. If Justin had just pushed just a little bit more, Alan would have volunteered to speak every day from now on. Thankfully, Justin didn't do that to Alan. He didn't take advantage of him, but Alan did a great job. But we've all been there. I hate public speaking. We all come up with an excuse. I can't do that. When a lot of times it's, I don't want to do that. Gideon was a brave man, although I'm not sure he knew it. Are we? When we see that person that we need to walk up to and hug them and say, "Hey, we've been missing you at church." Do we do that? I'm the world's worst about, I think I'll go down this other aisle so I don't have to speak to them. I don't want to embarrass them. I don't want to embarrass me. I don't want to look like a fanatic. You know, Gideon was a brave man. God had to force it on him. But he told him, he didn't, the angel of the Lord told him, "You are a mighty man of valor." Gideon was a man who required a sign. Do we require a sign? I'm afraid we do. We don't expect God to talk directly to us. Although I'll bet every one of us secretly have said to ourselves, "Boy, I just wish God would one time tell me to go do that." Hold on. God can use us wherever we are. We've got to do what He tells us to do. We've got to work up that courage. Do we allow Him to do that? I've got a man I'm trying to set up a lunch with because I want to talk to him about why he doesn't come to church now. And I called him on the phone, and I told him I'm going to be out of town for a week. We'll do it the next week. This was last week. So I wait till about Thursday, and Thursday would have been the perfect day. I didn't have anything to do for lunch that day. Really nothing going on in the afternoon. Would have been a good time to do it. But instead, I decided to call Terry Collins and see if he wanted to go to lunch. What time do you want to go? I don't know, Terry. You just come by and get me whenever. It doesn't matter. And Terry does. I don't remember what it was, say 11:15. Terry comes around the bank. He stops beside my window as he comes by. I see him, I hold up a finger. I'll be out as soon as I get off this phone call. I do. I go out, and the reason I point all that out is it was entirely random. No way to know what time we had that lunch set up. I get in Terry's truck. We pulled to the end of the drive-in, and you know who comes down Main Street and turns down the hill by Tommy Ballinger, with the man that I needed to invited to lunch. Now, I don't know if God's talking to me directly or not, but it happened. Anyway, I've since called him. We've made an appointment. I don't know if either of us will show up, but we need to all do that. Talk to these people that aren't here. See if we can get them to come back. For our sake and for their sake. Perfect time. All right, I appreciate you being here.